Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series on In Defense of Skepticism, how to believe nothing, doubt certain knowledge, dismantle dogmatists, avoid contradictions, eschew error, and never fall on the wrong side of the burden of proof. Again, in this video we're going to be looking at arguments and how one can argue without beliefs. This is often a claim that is leveled against the skeptic, that you're not able to argue if you don't believe in things like the laws of logic, or you don't believe in reason or truth or what have you. In this one we're going to mostly be focusing on objections to the claim that you can't argue without beliefs or without logic. Okay? I'm going to show one way you can argue without beliefs, and I'm going to explain several responses to the objection that if you doubt the laws of logic, you can't argue. Let's take a look. First off, we're going to recap the way that the indirect skeptic, my skeptical position, argues. First off, you assume another's position in the first line of the proof. Generally, whoever you're arguing with. You demonstrate that position leads to a contradiction, and then you negate those original assumptions and leave yourself back lacking all beliefs. Once again, let's take a look at the way that this works with something so simple as assuming the laws of logic. Premise 1, assume the laws of logic are true. Assumed indirect proof. Premise 2, all propositions are either true or false. That's the law of the excluded middle, one of the laws of logic, in fact, one of the most central laws of logic from premise 1. Premise 3, the proposition, this proposition is false, is neither true nor false. If you want to assert that it's true or false, be my guest, but it doesn't seem to be either. Premise 4, there exists some proposition that is neither true nor false. That's premise 3, existential generalization. Premise 5, it is not the case that all propositions are either true or false. Premise 4, change of quantifier. Therefore, it both is and is not the case that all propositions are either true or false. 2-5 conjunction. That is a contradiction, so we can step out of our indirect proof and claim, therefore, the laws of logic are not true. 1-6, indirect proof. However, we can't then assert that dogmatic claim. Why? Because we just proved it using the laws of logic, and the laws of logic may or may not give us things that are true. So, we should probably get rid of that claim as well, and step back into our lovely skeptical world of suspending judgment on such claims. The point is, however, if you assert the dogmatic claim that the laws of logic are true, you're going to end up in a contradiction. One way or another. We'll take this with another argument, just to kind of add to these skeptical arguments. You could do this with some of the academic skeptics' arguments. I just felt like going over Agrippa again. So, assume that knowledge exists and is defined as justified true belief. And the laws of logic are true. Assumed indirect proof. Premise 2. The justification for any given belief B must either come from B itself, another belief that justifies itself, a circular chain of belief, or an infinite regress of beliefs. Premise 3, the justification for B cannot come from itself or another self-justifying belief, as such a belief would be arbitrarily justified. Premise 4, the justification for B cannot come from a circular chain of belief, as circular reasoning cannot be justified. Check out my previous video for a deeper defense, or rather, my video 2 videos previous, the Pyrrho and the Academics, or the Munchausen's Trilemma video, or all number of videos I've done on this basic same argument. It's Agrippa's Trilemma, it's Munchausen's Trilemma. I'm just showing how it can be offered for the indirect skeptic. Premise 5, justification for B cannot come from an infinite regress, as there'd be nothing to actually support the whole regress. Therefore, premise 6, no belief can be justified. Therefore, knowledge both exists and does not exist. That's a contradiction. Therefore, premise 1 is not the case. We can throw that one out too. But as with our last argument, because it was based on the laws of logic, we can't dogmatically assert that premise 1 is not the case, because that claim would be based on the laws of logic. So it's a little bit worrying. Now we're going to take a look at a number of objections. Most of these objections are going to be focused on denying the laws of logic, or rather just not using the laws of logic, or not having in one's belief structure the laws of logic, because that's where I get the most objections to my position. Objection 1. If you have disproved the laws of logic, don't you assert the negatively dogmatic conclusion that the laws of logic are false? Well, not only the point I made earlier that we can't really prove the laws of logic are false with the laws of logic, it seems a little worrying, but there's a deeper problem here as well. So let's say I want to take as a dogmatic statement that the laws of logic are not true. Well, it seems that that's not really honest for me to say. I would have to do a disjunction between the laws of logic are not true or I made a mistake in my proof somewhere. So the objection to that would be, then why not assent to P7a? Well, Because that's not really the full picture either. Therefore, the laws of logic are not true, or I made a mistake in the proof, or I was tricked by an evil deceiver. This is where kind of some of the academic arguments and the eliminate all doubt principles are going to come in a little bit. The objection would be then, well, why not assent to P7b? Well, because we can have a long chain of or this, or that, or this, or that, and so on and so forth. Laws of logic are not true, or I made a mistake in my proof, or I was tricked by an evil deceiver, or my mind was inhabited by an evil scientist, as I'm only in a brain in a vat, or I'm in the Matrix, or I was prevented from arguing correctly by some computers, or this, or that, or the other thing. The point is, I can't assent to an infinitely long proposition, so I can't assent to the conclusion. I can merely suspend judgment on its truth value. Because I can't assent to it, the only logical thing to do is to suspend judgment on it. No matter what we do and plug in for this X, therefore the laws of logic are not true, or X, where X is supposedly an exhaustive list of other possible scenarios. No matter what X is put there, it will contain the unwritten assumption that the only options are that the laws of logic are not true, or X is. Yet there's no justification for that claim. There's no way that we can justify that those are the only things, that is an exhaustive list. So there's no way for us to justify that claim. So even though we have shown within our indirect proof that the laws of logic lead to a contradiction, we cannot negatively dogmatically assert that the laws of logic are false. We can simply say that they seem to lead to a contradiction, but we might be mistaken. Objection number 2. If you are skeptical of the laws of logic, how can you use them in your proofs? I get this one a lot. They say, oh, stop using logic if you don't believe in logic. You don't like logic, so stop using it. Well, that's not really how it works. Once again, the only reason the skeptic is using logic at all, or this version of logic at all, is because other people do. The indirect skeptic brings none of their own beliefs to the table, as they don't have any beliefs. But since most people use the laws of logic, it's okay to assume them when arguing against their position, because you're showing that their position leads to a contradiction. So it's all contained in that first line of any proof, that first premise. We're allowed to do this so long as we close out of the proof. When we close it out, one of the things that we deny is this indirect proof that provides us with truth and all our other assumptions. We have to include that one in all the assumptions. The indirect skeptic doesn't hold indirect proof as the only belief that they have. They don't believe in that. However, the laws of logic are lovely, and they've given us this nice tool that allows us to have no beliefs and then step into a discussion. Because most dogmatists that we argue with believe in the laws of logic, it's pretty easy to use indirect proof to talk about it. If the opponent of the skeptic did deny the laws of logic, then we would not be able to assume them in the first line, as this would be misrepresenting their position. If you are a dogmatic philosopher who does not believe in the laws of logic, who specifically denies them, please comment, message me. I'd be fascinated to debate with you, because that sounds like a really interesting position. It sounds like a really creative position. It sounds like a position that's stepping outside the kind of conventional box that philosophy has stuffed us in with these laws of logic. Don't worry, we'll get to more on that in a second. Objection number 3. Wouldn't a world without the laws of logic be absurd and nonsensical? How can the skeptic explain the seeming rationality of our world without the laws of logic? Well, first off, simply because the logic of laws that we have right now lead to a contradiction doesn't mean that all laws of logic that we come up with will. For a system without the law of the excluded middle, that proposition that I always show leads to a contradiction, check out something called fuzzy logic. There's other versions of logic that are out there, and we could spend time trying to come up with other versions of logic. However, the laws of logic that we have right now are so ingrained in our belief structure that it's really hard for us to conceive of something else. Even if it were the case that it appeared that our universe behaves rationally, which it's arguable whether it does. It seems to be pretty strange. It would not follow that it actually does. And even if it actually did behave rationally, following a set of laws would only be one explanation. It could actually be kind of along the lines of a theistic conclusion, controlled by some mind or some being that doesn't have to follow laws, but simply makes things as they choose. And finally, the cool thing about the skeptic's position is that the point is that we can't explain things, and that we don't know. So if the conclusion is that we don't know why the universe appears to follow laws, the skeptic's done their job. If the conclusion is, it seems like the universe follows laws, but none of the laws we have seem to adequately explain it, so we don't know why the universe seems to follow laws, that's great for the skeptic. That's exactly what the skeptic's doing. They're showing you that you don't know things, that you don't know what you think you know. Objection number 4. Doesn't this assume that contradictions are always going to be a bad thing? No, not necessarily. That's just one of those premises that gets pulled in along with the laws of logic. They are what claim that we should deny any statements that lead to contradictions. If you were to come up with a system of logic or a system of beliefs that says, you know what, contradictions are great, keep them around, then we would not be able to say, as indirect skeptics, that that's a problem if we ended up in a contradiction. However, there would probably be other things in that system of beliefs that you wouldn't like that we would try to show that your beliefs lead into. If everyone were to become a skeptic about the laws of logic, wouldn't that mean we'd have to stop doing philosophy? That no one could make arguments again? Doesn't this seem to be really reductionist and self-defeating? Well, here's the problem. No. It would just mean we have to come up with a better system of logic and reasoning that doesn't lead to contradictions. We can keep trying new things and discovering new types of logic that might fare better. We should go out and try to search for different ways to obtain knowledge or different ways to define or understand knowledge. The only reason that we prefer what we have, it's entrenched in our system of education. All of the philosophers up to a certain point have used this system of logic. So if we were to come up with a new one, we'd have to throw out all of those old philosophers, and we'd really don't want to do that. If our tools are not good enough to solve a problem correctly, we shouldn't continue to muddle along with those old tools. We should get new ones. When the laws of logic have been shown time and again to lead to contradictions, and our definition of knowledge makes it unattainable, that does not mean we should pretend that nothing is wrong and continue with business as usual. It means we should change our definitions of knowledge, or find another understanding, or another word to explain what we're doing, and we should change the laws of logic, or just give up on them. The dogmatist is the one that sees that something is wrong, and still holds tight to that broken system. That's why they're called a dogmatist. They believe in that dogma so wholeheartedly that even when shown that it's broken, they won't give up. Next up, we're going to take a look at how to live as an indirect skeptic, how to live without beliefs in more depth. Watch this video and more at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody. Hello everyone, Bertrand Russell here. If you enjoyed that video, you should check out these other videos by Carneades.org, or subscribe to Carneades.org on YouTube for a new philosophy video every single Sunday. And remember, men are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education.